If it's hour 3 of a Tuesday morning, it's Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Dave Bowman, been with us all day. Going to take it, hand it over to him in a minute, let him take us in. This is our first in a series. Dave, if I understand this correctly, this is going to march us right up to July 4th of 1776. When? Next July, maybe?
Yeah, if everything goes according to plan, we'll be wrapping this up the week of July 4th, 2026, which is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Think of this as...
What that tells me is this is a long slog to get there. It didn't happen overnight, right?
No, it did not. And we're going to talk about that. So think of this as Constitution Thursday, but for the Declaration of Independence.
Ooh, I really like that idea. Renewal by Anderson bringing you this first hour of the show. You can link up to everything Dave's doing on the show page today at billmick.com. The show page entitled this morning, Gators, Language, Trump, and Dave. Dave being Dave Bowman. Dave, what are we doing here today?
In the 1840s, there was a young historian who was curious about some things. There was a renewed interest in the American Revolution and what had caused it and the people who fought there. And by the 1840s, of course, most of the people who had actually been there were already gone. There were a few left, including a guy by the name of Captain Levi Preston, who was a 91-year-old veteran of the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Oh, wow.
And this historian sat down with him and asked him, he was really digging for, okay, why did you, Levi Preston, go to fight the British? I don't think we comprehend sometimes the impact of that. Think of this in terms of, I don't know, the University of Alabama's ROTC department taking on the 1st Marine Division, the 366th Tactical Fighter Wing from Hill Air Force Base, and the 7th Fleet. We're talking about amateurs taking on the world's most powerful military, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. But why? What motivated you to do this? Now, the historian, a guy by the name of Mellon Chamberlain, had come to expect some certain answers because there's an intellectual aspect to the American Revolution that we talk about all the time, the Enlightenment, the philosophers, the issues that were involved. And he began to ask the captain a series of questions. Was it the tea tax? Is that what made you go fight the British? And the captain's answer surprised him. He said, no, I never drank tea anyway. I prefer coffee. Well, was it the Stamp Act? I never saw any stamps, so I don't know anything about that. Was it the writings of Locke and the other Enlightenment philosophers? And he was surprised to learn that Levi Preston, along with most of the founders of this country, had never even heard of John Locke, let alone Enlightenment philosophy. They had no clue what they were talking about. Well, then what caused you to go fight the British? His answer is one that should be written down. Well, it has been written down, but it's one that should be on all of our minds. He said simply, we had always been free, and we meant to be free always. They, the British, didn't mean that we should. Now, it's a short statement, but it carries in it the entire freight of the American experience. What did he mean by free? Was it the same thing we mean today? If we're honest with ourselves, the answer is no. And therein lies the crisis at the heart of our republic as we head into the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. To really understand what he meant, we have to look at what was going on. If you've go look at the United States Army SEAL. Go look at a flagpole in front of your local place. You will find symbols there that you don't necessarily recognize, but they are known as liberty symbols, things like Phrygian caps, the little red caps that you see on the Army SEAL. Liberty poles. You ever notice how most flagpoles have that little round ball on top of them?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it symbolizes something, and it symbolizes the idea, the concept of liberty. And liberty and freedom, while in our dictionaries have become almost synonymous, were not to people like Captain Levi Preston or others of that era. The two words have distinct meanings. They have distinct ideas behind them. And it's why if you look at many of the drawings, many of the portraits, many of the reports from that era, you will find this emphasis on liberty, not freedom. When we go to understand the difference between the two, we have to go way back. You can even go back to the book of Genesis, Bill, and there you meet a guy by the name of Joseph. Everybody remember him?
Sure.
Sold into slavery by his brothers, but eventually he finds favor in the house of Potiphar, and he is given control over the household. He manages the estate. He has the trust of his master. In a practical sense, Joseph is a free man. He can move about. He can make decisions. He can exercise authority. But he does not have liberty. He's still a slave. He may be entrusted with responsibilities, but he is not free in the truest sense of the word that Captain Preston meant. His status can be revoked at any moment. And when he is falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, what happens? He's thrown into prison without trial or appeal. It's a perfect illustration of freedom and how freedom, defined as an ability to act, can exist without liberty, defined as the possession of rights and of self-sovereignty. It's this distinction that matters because it cuts to the heart of why there is an American Revolution. Why is there an America? The founders were not simply seeking freedom from British interference. They were pursuing liberty, a permanent condition grounded in law, morality, and dignity of the individual. They wanted a society in which no man could be stripped of his status by the whim of a ruler. Joseph's story reminds us that freedom without liberty is an unstable situation, much as Captain Preston found himself on the morning of April 19, 1775. It can be revoked at any moment. It depends upon the goodwill of those in power. While liberty is grounded in justice, it presumes that individuals are not merely subjects, but they are participants in the moral and political order. And that difference, my friends, is the foundation of America.
And we continue in 60 seconds on WMMB. You'll find WMMB on Instagram at WMMB Radio. Dave Bowman with Dave Does History. Dave, as you talked about the difference between freedom and liberty, reminded me of something my father used to say. And it kind of conjoins the two. But he said, son, freedom isn't the freedom to do what you want to do. It's the freedom to do what you ought to do. The idea that rights come with a responsibility.
Well, and that's kind of the definition, although it's more the definition of liberty, but it demonstrates that we, in our language today, have conflated the two words. To us, they mean literally the same thing. And in fact, it's only in English, if you do an etymology study, you'll find that it's only in English that the two words actually do have different meanings. Now, politicians today don't understand that. Just for fun, I, over the past 2 weeks in my copious free time, did a study of the 3 political candidates for the presidency in 2024. And their use of the word freedom far, far outweighs their use of the term liberty. And usually when they use the term liberty, it's in the context of civil liberties. In other words, liberties that the government has given you. Mm-hmm. It's never the actual definition of the word. Before we understand what they actually meant by that word at the founding, we've got to recover those meanings. In a modern conversation, we toss them back and forth. They're synonyms. Politicians will wrap them in flags. Protesters shout them from megaphones. But they do have distinct histories. Freedom is Northern European, Germanic. It stems from an ancient word that's related to beloved or friend. And it indicates someone who is connected to a family or a tribe by birth. In the Germanic and Anglo-Saxon cultures, a free man was someone who belonged to that society. He was not a servant, not an outsider, not a stranger, but he was part of the group. It was not abstract, it was local. It was inherited. It meant mutual protection, shared obligations, and a rooted identity. You were free because your people were free. Liberty, by contrast, comes from the Greco-Roman tradition, and it means release from slavery, from debt, from domination. To be at liberty means that you cannot be dominated by another person. No leader can decide your fate. It literally means self-determination, which is what Joseph did not have. And it's what Captain Peterson and those who went to Lexington and Concord meant to have. They meant for us not to be free. We meant to be free. We mean to decide for ourselves what we will be.
It's a long march to July 4th of 1776, and Dave Bowman takes us there as we continue. Dave Does History right here on 92.7 FM WMMB. We pick it up in moments. Stay with us.
All the way from Silverdale, Washington, here's Dave Bowman on Bill Mick Live.
It's Dave Does History, and we're taking a look at why we marched to July 4th of 1776. Dave, you've done a good job defining freedom and liberty, but that's not all of the story. What do you got?
No, it's not. In the 1830s, as I said, Alexis de Tocqueville comes to the United States. He's a Frenchman. And he writes his very famous book, Democracy in America, which is what drives Mellon Chamberlain to start studying this stuff. There's this really desire to intellectually understand things. And a lot of these historians are stunned to discover that very few of the things that we think caused the American Revolution, the Stamp Act, the tea tax, the Intolerable Acts, are really what's involved here. What's really involved here is this concept of American liberty, which de Tocqueville notes in his book is not just a legal system. Now, you can define liberty as the rule of law, but it's more than that in America. It's a lived experience. It's passed on from generation to generation. He actually will refer to this in French as a moeur of the heart. Moeur being a French word that means literally a habit of the heart. It is something that is so ingrained in Americans that we just naturally carry it out. It sounds quaint to us today, but he's not talking about mottos or civics classes. He's talking about our customs, our instincts, our everyday choices that shaped how we saw ourselves and see ourselves today, and our role in the Republic. How often do we lament that loss of civic engagement today? Could it simply be because we've lost that habit of the heart? These are not abstract principles. They are gut-level convictions that Americans had. The founders, and let's be clear, we're not talking about George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton. We're talking about Levi Preston. We're talking about Charles Holt. We're talking about Ebenezer and Isaac. We're talking about all those people who actually went and fought the British, who actually carried this stuff out. Those founders did not spend their time reading philosophical volumes. Most of them had never heard of John Locke. Their understanding of what liberty was came from the daily life of their people, the rhythms of how their local governance worked, the moral obligations that they had to their neighbors, and the stories that were passed down from their fathers to their sons, from the village green, the church pew, and even the jury box. This is the understanding that they had of what liberty meant. And it's why Captain Preston says they meant that we wouldn't be free in the sense of liberty. And
you said something key there, Dave, and I think it is, and something that is lost in large part, is our obligation to our fellow man, to our other Americans here.
That's a big part of liberty. It's a big part of the American understanding that we have a cultural, moral obligation to our fellow countrymen. And that really has been lost.
Renewal by Anderson is this hour's sponsor of the show. They have got an amazing special for you for this month. It is their Window of Opportunity savings event. If you buy 2 windows or patio doors, get the third 60% off. with no money down, no payments, and no interest for 12 months. Now, terms and conditions apply. You see those details at bestwindowsflorida.com. Call Renewal by Andersen today for that free design consultation. You can do that by dialing pound 250 from your cell phone. That's pound 250. Say Best Windows. You're connected in seconds. You'll have an option to get a one-time auto dial text from iHeartMedia. And as we look at these Acclaim windows and doors from Renewal by Andersen, they bring you unmatched strength because they're made of Fibrex, which is much more durable than traditional vinyl windows and doors are. They're impact resistant, hurricane rated to your zip code, energy efficient, noise reducing. They've got longevity because of that Fibrex construction. And they are customizable to your home the way you want them. Peace of mind for you with Acclaim Impact Windows and Doors from Renewal by Andersen at bestwindowsflorida.com or pound 250, license number CGC 1527613. Have we lost that sense, Dave, of obligation to each other? Are we more self-focused than the founders might have imagined?
I think we have. And I think that it's because, as we were talking about the dilution earlier in the show of the culture, we have lost that mindset. It's here in America that those two words, liberty and freedom, libertas from the Latin, Freiheit from the German, really become both yin and yang in a lot of ways. They're different meanings, but they can't function without each other, not properly. You can have freedom without liberty, but you can't and you can have liberty without freedom. But if you really want to have a society that works, they have to work together. And it was that understanding in our culture that gave it staying power. It's what drove men like Levi Preston to go to Concord. When liberty, though, becomes a legal abstraction, and this is, I think, where we are, it can be revised. Dictionaries can change the meanings. It can be ignored. Our politicians used to regularly, you go back to read their speeches in the old times, in the past days, and compare them to modern speeches. Politicians today do not talk about liberty. They number one, they don't understand what it is. But number two, they certainly don't talk about it. And if they do, they talk about it in terms of civil liberties. They talk about it in freedom from this and saving democracy and those sorts of things. They never talk about that responsibility that comes with it. It should be woven into the fabric of our daily life. And in fact, in the founders' generation, it was. It's something that they grew up with. They breathed in. They learned by example, which is a big part of our issue today. It becomes self-reinforcing. When that fabric gets torn, though, liberty can become little more than a slogan. The American colonialists, in essence, were trying to preserve that liberty. They weren't dreaming of a utopia. They were defending what they already had, a deeply ingrained way of life that assumed personal responsibility, local accountability, and moral restraint. They believed in liberty not as a novelty, but as an inheritance, a habit of the heart, a sacred trust. This is, in reality, Bill, this is why it makes liberty so hard to export. You want to know why nation building doesn't work? Because you can't impose it with a tank. You can't encode it into a constitution and then just call it a day. Liberty has to be cultivated. It has to be modeled. It has to be lived until it is that habit of the heart, second nature. And like all things in culture, it's vulnerable to erosion, can be lost in a single generation through apathy, moral decay, forgetfulness. And this is the real threat to American liberty. Not some foreign power, but our own disinterest in maintaining the conditions that liberty requires. One of which is that society that is bound to itself, it's free, and so it's united, it's joined, and yet at the same time it is self-determining in its direction, where it's going to go, what it's going to be. We decide that. And in 1775, there was a open realization that the King of England, King George III, meant to decide for us what we would be. And many people, Captain Levy Pearson among them, decided that he meant for us not to be, and we meant to be. And in those simple words are the source and the cause of the American Revolution, and what will eventually lead to those words being written down on a piece of paper saying, this is why you should pay attention.
Fighting for something very different than they were experiencing as citizens of the crown. And we continue with Dave Does History in moments on Bill Mick Live.
Have something to add to the conversation? Call Bill now, 321-768-1240.
Renewal by Anderson, our sponsor, as Dave Bowman brings us Dave Does History, taking a look at the March to July 4th of 1776. Started well before that, and it starts with these concepts of liberty and freedom that aren't exactly the same thing, and we seem to have lost some of that along the way. Dave?
They are not the same thing, and yet without each other, they're incomplete, each of them. The Declaration of Independence, which will be written a year from now in our story, is full of soaring rhetoric. We love most of the Declaration of Independence, at least the parts we read. But if you read it in the context of one of the founders, the people who were there, it's not a license to do whatever you want. It's a
Which
call.
is how it's interpreted today, sadly.
Exactly. It's a call, though, to ordered liberty. The founders believed that to be free, was to be self-governing, self-determining, and that begins in your heart, a moor of the heart. It means ruling your passions, governing your household, serving your town, defending your land, submitting to laws that you had a hand in making. It was a call to duty, not a cry to indulgence. It means self-restraint, self-rule, duty to the community. Bill, this is, a question that I used to get asked a lot is, how come I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party? Well, I actually ran this experiment once upon a time. Summarized to me the Libertarian Party's philosophy. What's mine is mine. Do you know that in the Talmud, it actually says that anybody who says that, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, is equated to the people of Sodom, because you don't understand the concept of ordered liberty. That's what Captain Preston is talking about. He's not talking about tea. He's not talking about philosophy. He's talking about something that's lived and felt. The instinctive belief that men have a duty to live free and ensure that their children would be free after them. That's what drove them to go and face down British regulars. It's not theoretical, it's ancestral. The Declaration asserts that all men are created equal and they're endowed with certain unalienable rights. But the founders did not believe that those rights existed in a vacuum. Rights have responsibilities. To claim liberty while abandoning those responsibilities is to invite ruin. They understood something that we seem to have forgotten, that unrestrained freedom, that is freedom that is disconnected from virtue, quickly becomes bondage. And a people that cannot govern itself morally will soon be governed by force. I think that today we're in danger of forgetting that, if we haven't already. Too many Americans believe today that liberty just means do whatever I want, which the scriptures also talk about in the book of Samuel, right? Every man did what was right in his own eyes.
Yes.
No consequences, no responsibilities. It's not.
If you talk to libertarians today, that's exactly it. The end result is chaos and no law. I'm going to be responsible. I'm not going to harm anyone else, and no one else is going to harm me. And it ends up being a society of chaos.
It destroys your society. And a people that will not govern themselves morally, as I said, will be governed by force. Mm-hmm. If you don't have consequences and no responsibilities, it's not liberty. It's narcissism dressed up in patriotic clothing.
Yep.
Liberty, if we rightly understand it, demands limits, it demands virtue, it demands sacrifice. And if we think of it only as a shield for our own desires, we will soon find it powerless against our own vices. And when that happens, we won't need tyrants to enslave us. We'll already be enslaved from within. But the tyrants won't have any problem at that point stepping on us anyway. Now, we're going to start a study over the next year. We're going to talk about how we got from that concept, that idea of liberty, to those words on the page 249 years ago right now, but 250 years ago. But as we do that, let's remember that liberty is not preserved by the government. It's preserved by our hearts and our habits of those hearts, trained in virtue. It's passed down by parents who live it, by citizens who demand it, and by institutions that reflect it. We always meant to be free. We meant to be free always. It's a habit of the heart. And if we're to be worthy of that inheritance that our founders left us, it must become for us a habit of the heart as well. We have to teach our children that liberty is earned, not assumed. That freedom is maintained by responsibility, not removed from it. That the right to speak freely, worship freely, assemble freely, those are only protected when we use them wisely. Liberty to endure must be practiced in little ways, in the courage to speak truth, humility to obey rightful authority, in the discipline to raise moral children, in the willingness to sacrifice for the good of the whole. We're not born knowing how to live free. We learn it or we lose it. The habits of the heart have to be taught, cultivated, renewed in every generation. And we also need to remember that our founders did not shed blood so that we could be comfortable. They shed blood so that we could be worthy. And if we fail to pass on that vision, not in our textbooks, but in our habits, we're going to lose more than our liberty. We lose the ability to recognize what we have lost. And I think that's where we are now. We don't even know what liberty means. And so because we don't know what it means, it doesn't bother us that our politicians don't talk about it. And yet, if you go to 1775 and look at the illustrations, look at the symbols in our country on the United States Army seal, look at those things. You will see symbols of liberty. They're called liberty poles, not flagpoles. They're called liberty caps. Liberty was what was engraved on their powder horns, Bill, not freedom, liberty. Because that's what they were fighting for. The right to determine for ourselves who and what we would be. You can have all the debates and discussions you want about what caused the American Revolution. Was it taxes? Was it gun control? Was it taxation without representation? In many ways, it was all of those things, but all of those things mattered because we believed in liberty, and because that liberty was the habit of our hearts.
And we pick it up in 60 seconds here on Bill Mick Live. O'Galley Electric, one of our sponsors here on Bill Mick Live. You Floridians know hurricane season is just a couple of weeks away. You prepare for it before it ever hits, and now's the time to reach out to O'Galley Electric for a Generac home standby generator. Not only are you buying this from a service-disabled veteran-owned business, you get the benefit of a 10-year Generac extended warranty and 4G LTE service, plus your first maintenance visit at no cost. So terms and conditions apply. You learn all of that and set up your appointment to see what kind of generator is right for you when you call O'Galley Electric at 321-366-0444. 321-366-0444. You get that Generac home standby generator from O'Galley Electric. You'll find him at eg-electric.com. Dave, let's get to some calls as we consider what's going on with freedom and liberty as we head to 1776. Mario, you're up first on this Tuesday. Good morning.
Good morning. Great discussion. One of these days we'll have to talk about the Statue of Liberty. But for now, what I'd like to know is, I'm looking at the Founding Fathers were products of the Enlightenment. And all of their thinking, the fundamentals, the foundations of their thinking were Enlightenment and Christianity and biblical. The But John Locke was a deep, wide contributor. His influence on the Enlightenment was extreme. You could almost say that John Locke was the father of the Enlightenment. And so our founding fathers, their thinking was very much founded in John Locke.
Okay, Mario, thank you. Let's go next to check in with Gary in Palm Bay. Hey, Gary, good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning to you both. You know, Dave, you're talking about freedom and liberty, and I have a connection to that. As Bill knows, I was a military broadcaster for AFRTS and AFN. I was stationed in West Berlin, 1984 to 1990. And I saw the Berlin Wall come down. And I remember the East German citizens saw this live press conference where Gunther Schabowski, the East German spokesman, said our people can now go across the wall. And of course, he screwed that up because Egon Krenz had told him, well, we're going to discuss it. And he announced it as it had already been happening. And like several thousand East Berliners came to the wall to try to get across the West Berlin. And they said, well, we're not going to shoot our citizens. Let them go. And a lot of them were interviewed by West German media. And they said, no, we're not coming over here to leave East Germany. We're coming over here to take a look at West Berlin. Our possessions, our apartment, our job is still in East Berlin. We're just coming over to take a look. But they never had that freedom to do it before. And then they did. And then, of course, a couple of months later, East Germany went away and the whole thing came back together again. And it was just one Germany again. And that was an example of freedom and liberty.
Very good, Barry. Thank you. I appreciate that look. Let's go to Mac, who is in Melbourne. Hey, Mac, what's up?
Yeah, hey, an essential conversation this morning, guys, and thank you, Dave, for all your good words. I don't know are you familiar with an author by the name of Michael Novak by chance?
Dave, you familiar with Michael Novak?
It's possible. I have a whole bibliography and hundreds of books.
He wrote a book. He wrote a book about 30 years ago called The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism. And if he is listening to your conversation this morning, he'd be up cheering. He came out with a sequel called 30 Years Later. I would encourage you to get a copy of that book and the follow-up to 30 Years Later Revisited, because everything you're saying, but self-restraint, moral compasses and so forth that led to the creation of what we've got in this country or had is in Michael's book. I really recommend you reading that and putting it as part of your studies upcoming. So God bless. Take care and good luck to you.
Thanks, Mac. We appreciate that. Up last, William in Melbourne. Hey, William, good morning.
Good morning. I got a question for Dave, a comment. I would like to know is this is what the government's doing now, is writing all these new laws and taking away our liberties? Morning.
All right. I'm not sure what the question is lying in that, but yeah, I see liberties taken away in many laws that are written, Dave.
In the Declaration of Independence, and we're not there yet, we're going to get there eventually, there are 27 grievances listed by Jefferson against the King of England. It's not all the list. There were 3 or 4 of them that were actually removed. But in those 27 grievances, if you were to go read those today, and then go read your newspaper, go watch your local news, open up your internet, you're going to be appalled, because the same things we were complaining about then are the same things that are happening now. And the reason is because we have not guarded our hearts. We have not made liberty our habit of our hearts, and we have allowed the government to become what it was all those years ago. We've allowed liberty to be confused with license and become flat.
Dave, that's a great start to where we're going next July, and I appreciate that. Renewal by Anderson made this hour possible. Stay with us on the journey every Tuesday in this 8 o'clock hour on Bill Mick Live. Wide open Wednesday tomorrow. Thanks to Renewal by Anderson for this hour of the show.